Hello, is it me you're looking for? Probably not, but YouTube has brought you to my channel anyway. Hey there guys, my name's Megan if you're new here, and if not, welcome back for another spooky episode of Killer Weekend, where each week we'll discuss a true crime case and you guys can feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments box below. As you can tell, I've watched one episode of Euphoria and I've also bought 3 bags of glitter. If you like all things true crime, supernatural, conspiracy theory and all that good stuff in between, then please hit that subscribe button. I'll be here for you every weekend with our true crime killer weekends, and on and off every couple of Wednesdays with our weirdo Wednesdays, where we'll discuss something spooky I've heard. I will leave a small disclaimer at the beginning of this episode. It does involve details of grooming a child and also domestic violence. If that's a trigger point for you, then please feel free to turn away now. Okay guys, so many exciting changes coming up. I'm not going to sing because I know some of you said that I was tone deaf. Rude. But I've decided to take the plunge and finally move to YouTube full time, which means I can bring you guys more of the content that you seem to love. You want more true crime? I got you. You've been looking for some UFO conspiracy theory videos with a side of makeup? Then just stay tuned. Thank you to every single one of you who've supported my channel this far. I'm still in a dream, the fact that you want to watch me every week. Honestly, I think you're all amazing, and if you would like to continue your support of this channel, then you will be happy to know, I know a few of you have been asking, I have finally got a Patreon account. If you want to check that out, visit www.patreon.com/Megan True Crime, and there is 3 tiers to choose from. Firstly, you have the accomplice level, which is £1.99 in GBP, that means Great British pounds. However, Patreon will convert that to your currency, and this is for general support of the channel, and fingers crossed it will eventually allow me to bring you guys that merch you've been asking for. The second tier I have available is the bestie, which is £3 a month, which not only allows you to support my channel, it also provides some amazing perks, such as 1 ad-free exclusive to Patreon viewers video per month, and also a little shout out for you when you join on this channel. Last but not least, we have the third and final tier, the final girl, the real MVP, and that is £4.99 a month. And with this, you not only get the same perks that tier 1 and 2 has, you also get additional behind the scenes videos such as blooper reels and maybe a cheeky wee makeup tutorial. As if that wasn't enticing enough, with the final girl access, you also have voting power to choose which cases you want to see on my channel next. And when we do finally get merch, you guys will be given 10% off of all merchandised items. So if you wanna join our little family on Patreon and support my channel, then like I said, visit www.patreon.com/Megan True Crime. Now on to this week's case, and guys, I am not lying when I say this one is a doozy. It will keep you up at night, and after 26 years with still no answers, this is not a cold case, it's practically freezing. When this case first occurred in 1996, it seemed like a slam dunk, and even investigators had their own opinion about who committed this crime. However, when a killer connection comes to light and a couple of pieces of dodgy evidence are also brought to the surface, it had someone like me asking the question, does no body really mean no crime? Tonight, everyone, we will be discussing the tragic disappearance of Rachel Mellon Skemp. Our story today takes place in Bolingbrook, Illinois, but it actually all began in an area of Melrose Park, Cook County in Illinois, where little Rachel Mellon Skemp was born. The area of Melrose Park is a well-populated suburb, which is actually popular with a lot of American, Italian and Hispanic families. Due to its industrial history, it's seen as more of an area for the working class, rather than the other richer larger suburbs around it. On the 13th of October 1982, Rachel Mellon Skemp was born, the first child of her parents, Jeff and Amy Skemp. At first, the young couple's marriage seemed to be all roses. The couple were both youth leaders at the First Baptist Church in Illinois, and they wished to raise Rachel with that same strong Christian faith. Rachel was practically raised in the church, and she was a permanent feature at their local youth group. Rachel was a beautiful little girl, which was no surprise because she'd inherited her mother Amy's stunning Filipina good looks and olive skin. Rachel's family members would even say that she was like a young Vanessa Williams, and if you don't know who Vanessa Williams is, she was the first black Miss USA, and also she sang the song from Pocahontas, the biggest Disney jam of all time, Colors of the Wind. You can own the earth and still all you want is earth and tears. I mean, I don't sound like Vanessa Williams at all, but it was a good tune back in the day. At the age of 3, sadly, Rachel's perfect family life was changing. Her mum and dad decided to separate, and with that, her mum moved with Rachel to Bolingbrook, Illinois, and her father moved to Dallas in Texas. Despite the distance though, Rachel remained extremely close to her father, Jeff, and she would also spend full summers in Texas with him. At the same time, her mother decided that she was ready to move on romantically with a man named Vince Mellon. It was sort of a whirlwind romance between Amy and Vince, and the two went on to be married and have 2 children of their own, a young daughter named Ashley in 1990 and a son named Jason in 1988. Whilst attending Tybalt Elementary School, a young Rachel Mellon Skemp discovered a love for music. She loved everything to do with the musical arts, but she was an old school kind of gal and she loved dancing around her room to the Beatles. She was a naturally intelligent young girl and was an A average student. Her friends said as she got older, she started to develop into a beautiful young woman, and that a lot of the times Rachel was the most beautiful girl in any room she walked into. Rachel had big dreams when she started Bernard J. Ward Middle School. She found an interest in science, particularly environmental science, and this is something she wanted to work towards a career in. Unfortunately for Rachel, her home life wasn't as content, and her stepdad Vince, who seemed charming and alluring at first, soon after the birth of his 2 children with her mum Amy, turned nasty. In 1990, Vince would attack his young wife Amy and even throw her down the stairs in front of their small children. In this altercation, he also threatened violence against a then 8-year-old Rachel. Police were called to the house by Amy and a restraining order was filed. But it wouldn't be long before sweet-talking Vince would worm his way back into the Mellon household, promising to change. Things in Rachel's young life weren't easy. She watched on as her mother Amy became more and more frightened and submissive of this man who was meant to love and cherish her. Amy would work full-time to support the family, whereas Vince could never hold a steady job and was often unemployed. Rachel would also help out financially by babysitting for kids in the neighbourhood. Not only that, she would tutor them on the side with math and English quizzes, just trying to get them to improve their grades. Her favourite job though was being a big sister to Ashley and Jason, who she cherished dearly. She absolutely loved her siblings with every fibre of her being, so much so that she would fantasize about running away to Dallas and living with her biological father Jeff. But she decided that she couldn't possibly do that because she couldn't leave her siblings, not in that house. The day of Wednesday, January 31st, 1996, started out like any other for the Mellon Skemp family. Amy, Rachel's mum, was getting ready for work and dressing the children for school, but when she peeked in on Rachel to make sure she was up and getting herself ready, she noticed that she was still in bed and she had quite a temperature on her. The day before, Rachel had been complaining about feeling congested and blocked up, and it it appeared that her symptoms had only worsened overnight. Amy decided then and there that morning that the only thing that Rachel needed was to curl up in bed and get herself better. She wasn't really worried about guardianship because, like we said, Vince was unemployed at the time, so he would be home to watch over her. At 10:45 a.m. that day, Rachel had a phone conversation with her biological father Jeff's parents, her grandparents, which later on was actually strange to Jeff because he was under the impression that Rachel was not allowed to talk to them. Allegedly, her grandparents didn't approve of the relationship between Vince and Amy, and therefore Vince had stopped all communication. The context of the call seemed pretty standard according to her grandmother Lucy, but just near the end of the phone call, Rachel seemed to get quite quiet and withdrawn, and when Lucy asked, "Is he here?" meaning Vince, is he there in the background listening in? Rachel replied with yes, and then shortly after hung up the phone. This would be the last time anyone would ever speak to Rachel Mellon Skemp. At 3:15 p.m. that afternoon, Rachel's little sister Ashley ran in excited from school to see her sister, but when she swung open her bedroom door, she noticed that Rachel was gone, and along with her, she had taken her 2 pillows and a blue blanket. She thought she might have moved into the living room, so off she went to look for her sister, but as she searched through the house, nothing. Rachel was gone. But even stranger than Rachel's disappearance itself was the way her family reacted to it. You see, no one sounded the alarm until Rachel's mum Amy arrived home at 5:30 p.m. that night. According to Rachel's family, officers who took the phone call from Amy at 5:30 p.m. didn't think anything strange about a young 13-year-old girl who wasn't well out in below freezing temperatures, and therefore it took over an hour for them to arrive at the home. I'd like to say that things improved when they eventually did arrive, but then I'd be lying. Law enforcement had a very finite idea of exactly what happened with Rachel's case and how to approach that. You see, Rachel, only a few months before in 1995, had actually packed a bag and ran away to a friend's house. Rachel stated at the time that the reason she had ran away was that her 2 younger siblings had broken something in the house and she didn't want to get the blame for that. So she went to her friend's house and literally slept outside in freezing cold temps for 12 hours. After 12 hours, she contacted Vince's parents, her step-grandparents, and they collected her and brought her home. But in a sad turn of events, because of this one occasion, Rachel's case was then treated as a runaway. Which is kind of strange because several items in Rachel's room pointed at more of a sinister motive. You see, we had spoken about Rachel's 2 large pillows, which were now gone. Also, a big blue blanket that she had that day. Not only that, her slippers were gone, but her winter boots and her winter coat remained in her bedroom. And would this young girl who's already not feeling herself wrap herself up in a blanket with 2 large pillows in tow, only wearing her slippers out in below freezing temperatures? One thing that was, a wee bit spooky to officers was the way the family were reacting to her disappearance and the lack of concern shown by the family members. For example, Vince said that that day was completely normal aside from Rachel not feeling well. He and Rachel played a Nintendo game, and then about 2:30 p.m. she was starting to feel worse, so she went into her bedroom at the back of the house and went for a nap. While she was doing so, Vince decided to walk the family dog, a white German Shepherd named Duke, despite it being so cold outside. Whilst out for their daily walk, Duke slipped out of his collar allegedly and ran off in pursuit of a rabbit. Vince said that he did look around for Duke for a couple of minutes, but after he couldn't see him, he just assumed that the dog would eventually find its way home. If leaving the family dog in freezing temperatures outside to fend for itself doesn't say sociopath, I don't know what does. Rachel's stepfather also stated that when he did take the dog out for the walk, he left Rachel in the home with the front door unlocked. Now, to me, I was raised in the city, so the thought of literally going to your bed without locking your door gives me palpitations. However, my fiance, his family, they were raised in the country, and I remember we were staying at their house a few weeks ago, and we were going off to bed, all walking upstairs, and his mum turns around and says to me she can't remember if she locked the front door, and then just keeps walking up the stairs to go to bed. No. But is that just the city girl in me thinking that there's a murderer behind every closed door? Probably. However, it does mean that if there was a predator in their street that day, that all they had to do was open the front door, which is why there was no signs of forced entry. What also didn't sit right with law enforcement was the fact that when Vince arrived back from the dog walk, he didn't check in on Rachel and make sure that she was okay, and considering she wasn't feeling well, they thought that was a little bit strange. When the family members started arriving home one by one from 3:15 p.m. to 5:30 p.m, no one apart from Rachel's mother thought that it was concerning that Rachel was missing. Vince, her stepfather, claimed to have been in the garage at this point working on a car of his, a passion project. He said this is where he would spend most of his time, and this is when officers noticed while taking Vince's statement that he had some deep scratch marks on his arms, which looked like defensive wounds. At this time, Vince became quite irritated and irate and said that no, these fresh gouges had come from working on his car earlier in the day. But there was some other red flags that were raised by people in the neighbourhood. The family's dog Duke was eventually returned to the home by a local estate agent, and that was fine. But none of the neighbours could actually recall seeing Vince out for a walk with the dog, and they stayed in quite a busy, populated street. So how was it that so many neighbours saw Duke out in the street on his own, but failed to see Vince walking him? It appeared to the public and to the officers investigating this case that Rachel had literally gone in her bedroom for a nap and vanished. But you and I know that people don't just vanish. Upon hearing the news that his daughter had gone missing, Rachel's biological father, Jeff, flew back from Texas to Bolingbrook, Illinois. And upon arriving, he said things were just instantly not adding up. Firstly, let's look at the lack of media presence from the family. Most people would think if your child went missing, you would be out there in the news making public appeal after public appeal. But not Rachel's family. They were pretty quiet. And when the time did come to hold a local search, Vincent even admitted to Jeff that he didn't have any interest in being involved in that. Jeff, who already had a pretty strained relationship with Vince, found one statement that Vince made a little bit strange when he stated, very matter of fact with no emotion, that obviously someone had snatched her. But how did he come to that conclusion? Another detail that stood out to Jeff was the phone call that took place at 10:45 a.m. that morning between Rachel and her grandparents, because according to Jeff, he was under the impression that no contact was allowed in that household between she and her dad's mum and dad. Vince had said that he had allowed Rachel to make the phone call to thank her grandparents for a Christmas gift that had been delivered to the house. Now, this seemed very unlike the usual controlling and possessive Vince. Rachel's father also had his frustrations about how the case was being handled. As it was initially treated as a runaway case, the Mellon Skemp home was not properly searched, which meant that if this crime was in-house, the perpetrator had time to cover his or her tracks. It's not that unbelievable to think that maybe what happened to Rachel happened in her very own home. We do have a legal history of violence within the house, and sadly, it didn't stop there. In 2003, 7 years after Rachel went missing, Amy would once again call police because her husband Vince had not only attacked her, but turned his hand on their younger son, Jason. In the altercation, Vince allegedly slapped Jason in the face and shoved him to the ground. After a series of arrests, Vince was arrested for driving under the influence when he caused a traffic collision whilst leaving the Crazy Rock strip club. Just Vince, keeping it classy as always. So, we've established Rachel's stepfather was not a good dude, but was he a killer? Well, we do have to ask ourselves why. And when the investigation seemed to be going nowhere, officers may have just found that answer. Under Rachel's bed in her bedroom, items were found that hinted at some deeply disturbing family secrets. In Rachel's diary that was found were some extremely distressing entries expressing a fear of Vince, but not for reasons that you might think. No, for something much darker. The entry written on the 7th of August 1995 expressed that not only had Vince kissed Rachel on the mouth, but he had touched her in an inappropriate and sexual manner. When she tried to resist, Vince explained himself as he was trying to teach her a lesson. The diary also told that during the hot summer days that Rachel was at home and her mum was at work, Vince wouldn't allow her to leave the house, so she would be cooped up for hours, terrified of this man. As if that wasn't heartbreaking enough, also stowed away under her bed in secrecy was a weird children's book given to Rachel by Vince called Daddy's Kiss, and also a large kitchen knife. Now, as a true crime sleuther, if that's even a word, I like to sleep with 15 screwdrivers, 2 kitchen knives and a baseball bat under my bed, but this is a 13-year-old child. And as a child psychologist once stated on a segment with Nancy Grace about this case, it's a massive red flag for someone of Rachel's age to be having knives under her bed. It showed that she didn't feel safe in her home environment, and not only that, it was a way of her gaining control back over her abuser, because she probably would have never actually had the courage to use the knife on her attacker, but it was a way for her to know that if push came to shove, her safety net was there. Her family and friends still deny any knowledge of a sexual or physical violence in the Mellon home. However, there was evidence that Rachel was going through something. The day before her disappearance, she was seen at her locker sobbing so hard, and her friend came over and had to console her. When she asked her what was wrong, Rachel said that she was dealing with something, but that she would handle it herself. What was she going to do? Was Rachel going to perhaps tell her mother about the abuse? But she was silenced. Unfortunately, even if she had, it probably wouldn't even have made a difference, because Amy decided to stand by Vince through the accusations of sexual assault, the scratches that were found on his arms, and he even made her sever her connection with investigators. The couple had both voluntarily taken part in lie detector tests, and we've said here before, they're not reliable, they test stress in the body, and it's a very stressful time for a family when a child goes missing. What was strange, however, was the family's reactions. Amy passed with flying colours, but Vince, however, was a different story. When he was given his results that he had failed the polygraph test, he became enraged and stated that not he or his wife or any members of his family would be cooperating with police. To Jeff Skemp, Rachel's biological father, this seemed very odd. It's Amy's daughter. Surely it should be her choice whether they continue to cooperate with law enforcement. But sadly, it wasn't her choice, and her abuser made that choice for them. In the years to come, Vince and Amy would stand by their word, and no contact was allowed between the family and the Bolingbroke PD. However, they did need further information from the family, which they were not willing to give, such as DNA samples from Vince, which had to have a court subpoena served to Vince before he would even hand them over. It was pretty clear to onlookers that they only had one suspect in mind in this case. Jeff even said that had the case been taken seriously from the beginning, he believes that they would have found something more damning in Vince's sacred garage. Shortly after Rachel's disappearance, Amy and Vince moved to Tennessee, whereas Jeff moved closer to Illinois to keep up with the investigation. Jeff would be very vocal in the media and even created a website and Facebook page in honour of his daughter, who he believes is now deceased. Amy and Vince, however, stayed out of the media limelight, but they did hire a private investigator. However, they severed all ties with this investigator when evidence began leading back to Vince slowly. In the year 2000, the case was brought to a grand jury, but due to the lack of physical evidence, they failed to indict either Vince or Amy Mellon in the disappearance of Rachel. Jeff Skemp is convinced more so now than ever that his daughter is deceased. There's never been any activity on her credit cards, and no family members have heard from Rachel since 1996. Because of Vince's violent and evasive behaviour, many believe that he was involved in his stepdaughter's disappearance and consequential murder. People believe that he made advances towards Rachel and she perhaps threatened him. This is why the pillows and the blankets she was sleeping with are now missing, because they contained DNA evidence. Is it plausible that he could have let the dog out as an alibi and that's why no neighbours remember seeing him walking the dog that day? It is possible. But we cannot ignore the fact that Rachel's remains have never been found. Despite searches with cadaver dogs, drones, and ground penetrating sonar in certain areas, there's still no evidence to suggest foul play. Also, Amy, her mother, claims that in 2001 she received 3 phone calls which she alleges were from her daughter. But this has never been proven, and many believe that Amy is fabricating this story simply to protect Vince. Here at Megan True Crime, we believe in innocent until proven guilty. So if not Vince, then who could it be? Well, when I tell you about the killer connection on this case, you'll be as flabbergasted as I was. One of the officers that was investigating this particular case was later convicted of murder and suspected in the disappearance of another young woman. You may know him as Drew Peterson. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, one half of the reason why we always say never marry a Peterson. I'm sure there's loads of lovely Petersons out there, but I wouldn't risk it for a biscuit. Drew Walter Peterson, a former Bolingbroke police sergeant, was convicted of the murder of his third wife, Kathleen Saville. His fourth wife, Stacey Ann Cales, went missing in 2007 and to this day has never been found. Her family, though, are certain she was a victim of foul play and are sure that his two wives weren't Drew's only victims. Could this be a really strange coincidence, or is this a killer connection that proves Vince Mellon's innocence? I'm not so sure, if I'm honest, but one thing I am sure of is that not enough was done to protect this young girl. There was many incidents that happened before her disappearance and even after that meant that these children should have been taken from that home and placed in a safer environment, and it wasn't done. Rachel was a beautiful little girl inside and out. She fell in love with the world and everyone and everything in it. To some, I'm sure Rachel will seem like another statistic, but to you and me, and I'm sure to her family who love her, we will always remember her as the beautiful, happy little girl dancing around her bedroom with her Walkman on and listening to her favourite song by Alanis Morissette, One Hand in My Pocket. I will leave all the details and links to Rachel's case in the description box below. If you know something, please come forward. It's never too late. It's been 26 years. Let's not make it 27. If you enjoyed this week's case, then please give it a big thumbs up for me. It really helps my channel. I also have an amazing podcast recommendation out there for all you little true crime gremlins. I love when you guys recommend your podcast to me, and I love the fact that I was recommended the Podcast From The Crypt by one of my amazing subscribers out there, and I've been hooked ever since. These guys are funny, they're badass, they get serious and right into the nitty gritty of the cases. And yeah, if you're a true crime buff like me, which I'm assuming you are if you're watching this channel, if not really sure why you're here, maybe just for the crazy hair. But if you do like true crime, then pop over to the Podcast From The Crypt. Spooky. I love you guys all so much. And like I said before, I'm going full time to YouTube. I'm going to be on TikTok. I'm going to be on Instagram. So if you would like to follow me, not home, because that's inappropriate. We all need our personal space. On Instagram, at Megan True Crime. I also have a TikTok page on the old TikTok, at Megan.truecrime. I'm 97 and I have Twitter. Does anyone still use Twitter? Not quite sure. But if you do, it's at Megan True Crime, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the Patreon page. If you're wanting to join and join tier 1, 2 or 3, it's www.patreon.com/Megan True Crime. So guys, like I say at the end of every episode, lock your doors, especially if you've got, minors sleeping unwell in that house. Don't talk to strangers, and also don't buy your stepchildren inappropriate books. I'm sure Daddy's Kiss is a lovely book about tigers and wildlife kissing their young, but it just sounds weird, so let's just not. See ya! I'm just so happy because I'm finally able to snack again. And look what I'm gonna have. Look at it, so much sugar. Yeah. Not that I need any more sugar, clearly. See ya!